All right. Thanks, Lloyd. So we are being recorded. Thank you, friends. We are the PDA Central New Mexico chapter monthly gathering, and we thank Lisa Franzen for her wonderful welcome for all of us and our guest presenter, Dr. Eva Moya. I'm Karen Bentrup. I'm going to do two tasks with you. The first one is tech tips. So let's just remember that you are all muted except for the speaker, and thank you for keeping yourselves muted. As you well know now, it reduces background noise, and if you want to have a private conversation, it needs to be a private conversation. So that'll help you. You can certainly be on video or not. We see your face or we don't. We love it both ways. Your participation is by your presence here, and we really appreciate that. We do have closed captioning enabled, so it depends upon your electronics, but generally you'll see it in the bottom. It might be in the three ellipses indicated as more, or you may just see show subtitle. And if you click that, it will give you the closed captioning. And remember, that is not real-time transcription. That's just the computer doing its best, this software doing its best job to gather our words. So sometimes it's just kind of funny, but it does help. So it's there for us. You can always gather the content of the chat either by clipping something directly out. You can also go to the three ellipses, that's those three little dots that are near the chat. And if you click that, one of your options is to save the chat, and it will just save it to your computer. So you can always do that as well if you just want to gather up that information and have it. I think those are our tech tips. So thank you for going through that again. And PDA CNM has made a commitment for the last several years that we do a land acknowledgement. And several days, just 2 days ago, on October 11th, New Mexicans celebrated Indigenous Peoples Day. And so that is both a city and a statewide celebration and honoring of Indigenous Peoples Day. And one way we honor Indigenous people and the First Nations when PDA meets is to read a land acknowledgement. The one that I'm going to share this evening is actually from the People's WPA. And that's actually WPA as in, if you're a little older and you know WPA, yes, it's referring to that. It's a spectacular document. It's dropped in the chat. I highly recommend you look at it. And then that is from the US Department of Arts and Culture. They are an NGO, and they produced the WPA and have been very forward in their work around creating land acknowledgements and active responsibility and honoring of the First Nations here. So this is their land acknowledgement. We recognize that all the land, water, air, and resources claimed by the United States was, is, and will always be Indigenous homelands. The US would not exist were it not for the exploitation of stolen slave labor and the continued dispossession of Indigenous peoples from their lands. We believe it is important to note that under the stewardship of Indigenous protectors, defenders, caregivers, and peoples, these lands and resources continue to be maintained. In New Mexico, we recognize the 23 pueblos and tribes, and that we are living on unceded Tiwa territory. We can honor this and our responsibility, particularly for those of us who are settlers, by contributing to the Honor Native Land Tax, and that link is in the chat as well, and you can support that at any level, the Honor Native Land Tax here in New Mexico. So thank you both for listening to the tech tips and our land acknowledgement from the out of the People's WPA. And now we're ready for Amy, who is on the planning team here for PDA CNM, and she is very well, she very well knows the work of Dr. Moya, and will do a wonderful introduction for us. Amy, thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here, and I'm ready to talk about Dr. Moya. Tonight, she will share an update on the border crisis in El Paso and Juarez, and speak about humanitarian efforts at the border to help families and children legally seeking asylum in the United States. As a border health expert, Dr. Moya will describe the economic deprivation, lack of medical insurance, health problems, limited infrastructure, and inequality experienced daily in the border region. As mentioned by Lisa, she will focus on the Dignity Mission, a program that sends thousands of pounds of food, clothing, toiletries, and other basic supplies to asylum seekers who wait in shelters to be processed at the border in Juarez and in other Mexican cities. These shelters often lack basic supplies to meet the needs of people fleeing perilous conditions in Honduras, Guatemala, and other Latin American countries. Dr. Moya is an associate professor in the Department of Social Work at the University of Texas in El Paso. Her areas of research include border health, binational social work, homelessness, intimate partner violence, and the use of photo voice. A renowned author, she is president-elect of the Association of Latino Social Work Educators, a fellow of the Kellogg Fellow Leadership Alliance, and has served as director of the United States section of the United States Mexican Border Health Commission. For over 37 years, Dr. Moya, a borderlander herself, has dedicated her career to advancing health and social justice along the Mexican border. Her honors, and this is a big one, include induction into the El Paso Women's Hall of Fame, among other honors. However, her most prestigious honor to date is the 2020 Otil Award from the Mexican General Consulate in El Paso. This award is the highest honor bestowed by the Mexican government to individuals who have aided, empowered, or positively affected the lives of Mexican nationals in the US or other countries. I just wanted to say a few words about how I came to know Dr. Moya. I first met her during a short trip to El Paso, Texas and Juarez on the 6/14 through 6/16 of this year. I went with 12 other women, including other volunteers with the 5-site council medical team. We worked with asylees who crossed the border in 2019, triaging them for health problems as they came across. This current trip that I was on in June was planned by Dr. Moya, the Hope Border Institute, and Jessica Corley. Jessica is the director of Asylum Program Albuquerque FaithWorks Collaborative. During our interactions with Dr. Moya on this trip, we found her to be an inspirational educator, mentor, and leader. For me, the highlight of our trip was our visits to 2 migrant shelters arranged by Dr. Moya in order to provide care. We were armed with our medical supplies, and we met several trans teens at Casa, located in El Paso, in what's known as the poorest zip code in the United States. These delightful young people openly shared their aspirations for the future now that they were here in our country in a safe place. They especially liked the donuts that Dr. Eva brought. After lunch, we went to a migrant shelter in Juarez called, and I hope I say this correctly, Respettrans, where 240 migrants were waiting to go to the US. We saw mainly moms and kids with respiratory illnesses, GI problems, joint pains. We provided counseling, supplies, over-the-counter meds, and prescriptions if needed. Dr. Moya was right there alongside of us, doing whatever she needed to be done, interpreting, helping with supplies, counseling distraught individuals, coordinating with the shelter director. As I wrote in my trip diary after the trip to El Paso and Juarez, Dr. Moya is a fantastic advocate for migrants, a brilliant woman who has many resources and is able to bring them to the needy. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Moya. Let me warn you, prepare to be inspired. Dr. Moya.
My dear Amy, that was I'm humble. I'm humbled. And first, let me first of all say, please call me Eva. Simple as that. Eva Margarita Moya Guzman. I think that's sort of like the full name. Drop the degree, because what's more important is that today I want to have really a conversation with you. And I first want to start by acknowledging Amy, Lisa, Karen, and Lloyd for everything they did in order to bring us together to this space. And I know that behind these wonderful 4 advocates and leaders in your community are dozens of others that co-lead and that follow and that give of their time, in essence, to help humanity. And none of this would have been possible if it wasn't for Cheryl and Jack Farrell, who I think I saw on the little screen, that they're present. And with them, you know, all the other wonderful colleagues and friends, Ed, Sally, Rosie, Roger, Reverend Holmes and his family, Las Placitas Presbyterian Church, and many others who have been able to make this mission a reality. So I just finished doing a 3-hour class, and sometimes when I sort of like I'm done with my class, my brain is full. And it's like, I like the students to say, may I be excused? But not this time. So what I would like to do is share with you some general perspectives about the border. More importantly, really walk you through some of the highlights of the Dignity Mission and really share with you the story of how people are coming together despite COVID because of what you at Las Placitas are doing and what you have entrusted us to do. So think of us, and I say us because, you know, I am only one, but with me is a group of incredible partners and friends. At first I called them like las hormigas, like little ants. They would sort of like help out, come in and pick and move things between the US-Mexico border region. But now they're really like ambassadors. And so first I wanna just give you a general perspectives on the border. And then I really want to concentrate on the Dignity Mission. And then I probably want to just take a few minutes to highlight some of the challenges and opportunities as I see them in my region here, or the Paso del Norte area, which is really Doña Ana County, El Paso, Texas, and Ciudad Juarez. And then maybe we can end by reflecting on what are the things that we can do. And I can put things out there, you know, in terms of action and advocacy. And then the rest is for you to ponder. So if I can do half of that I said that I would do, is say I'll give myself a sort of like a B. How's that? So I'll do my very best. I have asked my friends to please keep tally of time, because otherwise we'll be here all night. And I heard several of you say that you're getting ready for supper. So I'll be very mindful with the time. So the US-Mexico border, it's home. So when I sort of like introduce myself, I say, I'm a borderlander. And so what does that basically mean? That means that I'm a product of the 2 countries, the states of Texas, Chihuahua, and the relationship with New Mexico. The border itself is 2,000 miles long. It is actually today the most militarized border on Mother Earth. It is also the border with the most human movement, that is mobility and migration in modern times. And it is a border that no wall can seal it. That's as simple as that. So governments and former presidents and companies and legislators may want to seal the border, but no one can actually seal this incredible 2,000-mile long stretch of 2 countries that come together to unite. And no border keeps people apart, because what happens in this region of the world is that there's some incredible sense of resilience, incredible sense of fellowship and hermandad, which is like sisterhood. And despite the fact that we have walls and then rivers and then walls and then deserts, or a combination of, or we have failed policies or very restricted policies, or we have governors or elected officials that would like to seal, close, you know, build a wall, a bigger or a taller wall. Nothing really keeps people from moving back and forth, not even COVID. COVID has restricted the movement of people, primarily those that are considered non-essentials. I don't like that term, because when it comes to humanity, pretty much everyone is essential to humanity. Some have different roles than others, but nothing can really seal the border. So having said that, this is a border that is dynamic, but there's also has been in trouble for the last few years, a border that has the wealth of the United States, but also has among the poorest of the poor conditions on the United States. It connects with Mexico, which is 6 states on the Mexican side. And these states are better off than the rest of the country. So that gives you a perspective on sort of the dynamic and the dichotomy of the haves and the not have, and the challenges that we have. As a matter of fact, if you were to look at the US-Mexico border as a country of its own, and sometimes it needs to be understood in that fashion, and you were to take the 100 kilometers north and south, that is the definition that is used by the La Paz Agreement to define what constitutes the border region. We would pretty much look like each other. We would be pretty much the same in terms of the statistics in health, give or take. So you wouldn't really be able to determine where actually the line that demarcates the US-Mexico border is, because we're like connected to the hip. Let me just put it that way. So that's sort of like to introduce you to the border region. There are about 14 million people in terms of the population. It keeps moving a little. It's one of the most dynamic regions in Mother Earth in terms of youth. It's a region actually that produces incredible wealth and talent. And that basically we are told, based on the reports, that this is what the rest of the country, meaning the United States, is going to look like in the next 20, 25 years. That's the kind of demography that prevails in the region. Now, it's also a troubled region because socioeconomically we are poor, and all of the border region, with the exception of beautiful San Diego County, which is gorgeous. And I have arguments with my colleagues and friends about San Diego. San Diego skews the economics of the US-Mexico border region. Every single border county on the US side is medically underserved. What does that mean? That every county does not have enough health human service practitioners, professionals. So already that gives you a sense of sort of like the limited infrastructure that we have. But I could spend here the rest of the afternoon really talking about the border region and sort of like tell you more about the health trends and the problems that we have and the inequalities. We have regions on the US side. We have primarily neighborhoods or colonias, as they're not defined by the federal government. These are neighborhoods that lack infrastructure outside of El Paso, very much like communities in the southern Doña Ana area, Sunland Park, Anthony, where we don't have necessarily drinking water, potable water, sewage systems. Landfills are available, but there is really no collection of trash. And so therefore, some of these communities really have underdeveloped country conditions. And so I'll pause there to sort of like take you into this wonderful story of the Dignity Mission. I first met Cheryl and Jack. I think it was either a mid-January or an early February. I just knew that we had done, I believe, our training on Gestalt in psychology, and my friend Fabiola Eckelberry, who's a licensed professional counselor, had said, you need to meet this couple. This is an incredible couple. They're trying to find ways to help communities in need, primarily people that are waiting for either asylum or refugee status. And they have this mission called the Dignity Kids. And so when Fabiola, my friend, said that, I said, absolutely, I will meet your colleagues and friends. And we met at a parking lot. I think it was one of the Hilton Hotel on campus. What a joy. At that time, I had invited one of the Dominican sisters to join. And so it happened to be that it was the Dominican sister, another colleague, Sylvia, my friend, and Cheryl and Jack. And we started a conversation. And the conversation primarily led to a greater conversation about possible ongoing support. And all of it was pretty much based on the fact that Cheryl and Jack, with the input of Placitas community, had a vision, which is a vision to take the Dignity Kids to where the greatest need was. And so we said, we'll be happy to do anything and everything within our reach to ensure that we move your donations across the Mexican side. We had a little bit of a track record. Before that, the fall prior, we had already helped my colleagues out of Ohio to move, I don't know, hundreds of donations that they had sent in what first was to be a truck, but then happened to be an 18-wheeler? Is that what they're called? One of those huge trailers that ended up getting parked outside of Mi Casa, Su Casa, my house, your house here in El Paso. And once we were able to move that within 2 months, I said, my God, I think we can pretty much move the mountains. And so that's really how the connection with the Dignity Mission started. Since February, your communities have been rallying the donations to ensure that thousands of individuals that are trapped on the Mexican side, and some of them on the US side already, are able to have access to whether it's a hygiene kit, and most recently, whether are non-perishables. And most recently, we have added veggies or vegetables, now compliments of Jardín de los Milagros, which is a local farm in Anthony, New Mexico. So therefore now what I call our menu of humanitarian efforts have grown. Like this morning, you know, I was in a meeting and I sort of like saw the UPS truck stop by. And today, Cheryl and Jack, I did receive 2 huge boxes, which I think are the basketball hoops, followed with leche nido, which is powder milk for children and infants, with a lot of crayons, with belts and underwear. That's sort of like the kind of day that my family and the community has when your generosity come this way so that we can then move the generosity to where the greatest needs are. A lot of things have happened. I try to participate via Zoom with regular biweekly meetings with the Frontera Coalition, which is a welcoming coalition of more than 150 leaders from across the country, many leaders from New Mexico, because you're doing incredible things in New Mexico. And so I try to sort of like understand the pulse of what is happening in the border region. While at the same time, I listen to my partners from the Hope Border Institute. If you're not familiar with them, their website is fantastic. It is rich with resources. They have become champions of the Dignity Mission, and now they're fully committed in helping us move a lot of the donations into the Juarez side. Without their help, I wouldn't be able to get the things done that needed to be done on a timely basis. And so the pulse basically of the Hope Border Institute, the Frontera Coalition, as well as the International Office on Migrations, which is affiliated with the United Nations, and they're now based in El Paso. They have a field office, which is fantastic. You know, what we are hearing is the following. There are close to 25,000 people or more in Ciudad Juarez. Ciudad Juarez is a sister city to El Paso. El Paso, we're about 800,000 in population, and Ciudad Juarez is about 1,300,000 or so. So I am told the statistic is of 2 weeks ago is around the 25,000 individuals that are waiting, literally have been waiting for either weeks, months, in some cases up to a year now, to ideally get their names on a master list, to be acknowledged, to find a way to have legal representation, to be able to make their credible case to a court in El Paso in order for their case to be listened to, and in order for them to be able to seek what is literally a human right. The right to migrate, the right to apply for asylum is a right that we all as human beings should have. And so they're caught in a very awkward situation where we have seen over the last, the last 10 years, a change of policies between tightening the border to finding a way to create a system that would process applications for asylum or refugee status, to significant pressure coming from both Congress and the Senate to seal borders, to then a movement of trying to keep people out of our country, or some people out of the country based on where they come from and who they represent, with tightening up of the border, with, on top of that, protocols that keep people on the Mexican side, putting significant challenges on the Mexican governments. They don't have the infrastructure. And then COVID strikes with already the reality of unaccompanied minors that has been real and is present as long as I can remember, but not at the numbers that we have seen in the last 5 years. And so with COVID, it looks like, the Title 42, the remain in Mexico, the fear, of allowing individuals that come primarily from vulnerable communities and their perception that they could reflect to be major threats to the United States has really put incredible pressures locally and have also, unfortunately, increased the number of smugglers. And the smugglers who are making a fortune, out of the need of people to move because they have been displaced for many reasons. If we had another 2 hours, we could have a conversation of why is it that people move? And there are many reasons why. Someone would leave everything they have, the most important, which is their family, their children, sometimes separate families, come only with whatever they're wearing, maybe a backpack, if they're fortunate enough, with whatever resources they have. Many times they are exploited. Many times they face violence in the trajectory of where they left, in the journey of when they want to come in, as they enter Mexico and finally make it from the south of Mexico all the way to the north. And Juarez being only one of 12 points along the US-Mexico border that have a sister city to the United States. So the challenges are huge. What we are basically seeing as of last week is what I'll use the words of participants and people that we have been working with that have been able to now be in the United States because their cases are now recorded. And so therefore a date in a court has been set when 3, 6, 12 months from now, and they basically say, Eva, the border is sealed. La frontera está sellada. La frontera está cerrada. So the message is, given that the governments are trying to figure out how best to manage migration, how best to sort of like keep people from leaving their countries or their places of origin or stay, and how they're trying to put pressure into the Mexican government to almost seal the mobility. The reality is that people are trapped right now on the Mexican side, and they're patiently waiting for an opportunity to take place so that they can come the legal way, whatever that legal way may represent. Keep in mind that the border on the Mexican side, the states work very differently, and so do the states on the US side. So there is a rumor, for example, that Ciudad Juarez is a safe place to live. Ciudad Juarez, for the most part, is almost like a sanctuary community. The other side of the story is that Ciudad Juarez has been traditionally in the media the last 15 years as one of the most violent cities in the world. And so despite the fact, this is sort of like almost the paradox, that my brothers and sisters that are coming from Venezuela, from Cuba, from Brazil, from Ecuador, from Panama, from Honduras, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Haiti most recently, even as far as Turkey, China, Kenya, they're coming from Nairobi, they're coming from Uganda, and they're finding a way to make it through Mexico, all the way north. They're not necessarily able to cross. And so they are literally stuck on the Mexican side. And so when they're stuck on the Mexican side, it's a very complicated reality because like in the case of Juarez, you have among the most violent cities on Mother Earth with communities that are leaving violence behind of a different nature and that somehow feel safe or comforted in Juarez, Tijuana, Matamoros, Reynosa, Nogales, amongst some of the Mexican border communities, and in communities that are also confronting violence of their own, especially with the organization of crime. And despite the fact that there are these violent realities and significant poverty, they feel safer on the northern part of the country than the countries of origin or the countries that they're actually traveling from. So having said that, in Ciudad Juarez today, there are a total of 17 shelters. None of them are governmentally driven. So these are shelters that actually between the municipality, basically they have been able to get a old building that used to be a twin plant or a maquiladora that now has become the largest shelter in Juarez, to other pastors and places of worship that have pretty much opened up their doors to welcome guests. A filter that serves as an integrated facility, which is an old hotel that was conditioned with the support of international organizations to serve as the filter where people come in, they get registered so that they're accounted for as migrants. They are interviewed, they get tested for COVID, they get screened. If they turn out to be positive, they're isolated. And then once they are converted to negative, they are moved or sent or referred to one of the local shelters, which, by the way, are overcrowded conditions. So as much as we know about the World Health Organization guidelines to ensure that we mitigate the COVID risk, the reality is that some of these facilities cannot ensure the safe distance. They can ensure to a certain degree that they have water, which is restricted. I think I have never seen so much hand sanitizer in my life. I think that hand sanitizer is not in shortage, primarily in shelters. And so what we see is a very sort of like different face of immigrant, migration, refugee, asylum, with the smuggling of individuals, with actually human trafficking, with members of very vulnerable communities. We see unaccompanied minors, we see mothers with children, we see grandmothers with daughters and children, we see single father with children, we see people from Venezuela, we see, people that are coming from all over the world. So trapped in Ciudad Juarez, limited infrastructure, shelters that are trying to do their very best. And I think, Amy, you referenced Respettrans, which is run by a colleague who is a nurse. She's a member of the trans community. She herself, and she would say this very openly, was living out on the streets years back and knew the rough life, and decided that she needed to sort of like work on recovery, and ended up studying nursing, became really an outreach worker at a time where HIV and AIDS was barely beginning to put its face, and said, I'm going to dedicate my life to serve community. She has 2 jobs. And so she is a volunteer manager, founder of this organization. And so she serves anywhere between 150 to up to 290 individuals on any given day. Casa Carmelita, which is a sanctuary on the El Paso side, run by a group of concerned advocates. It's a sanctuary for members of the LGBTQI trans community that are seeking asylum. Casa del Migrante on the Juarez side, which is probably the longest lasting migrant facility that I'm aware of, run by Father Calvillo and a group of volunteers with the support of IOM, which is the International Organization of Migrations. And like that, there are other small shelters throughout the city of Ciudad Juarez that without them, I have no idea what kind of humanity and what kind of infrastructure we would have in place to stabilize communities and members of the vulnerable groups that are coming already with significant trauma, and they need a safe place to stay, they need a place to decompress, and they need to really be able to sort things out in order to prepare for the next leg of the journey, which is that leg that represents, hopefully in their dreams, becoming into the United States. So I want to share a few slides because, as much as we can look at the big picture and the macro forces that move and displace people, and those are really huge, and we can easily get discouraged. And trust me, there are days where I look around and I listen to my peers and said, Mother Earth has enough wealth to go around. And yet we don't see the distribution of the wealth taking place where there are humanitarian needs. And so, yes, we can try to spend the rest of our lives trying to change those conditions, and there are people working at that level. Or there could be the rest of us working in the trenches of communities trying to connect and leverage and bring a little bit of hope, joy, much dignity, and smiles to communities that are here, and therefore they're our brothers and sisters, and we don't question the purpose of why you got to this point, because we know that whatever it was bad. And so therefore you're out of that community into a community that is not your home, and you're about to process or move into another community that may become your home. But even if you cross to the United States, there's no guarantee that you will be allowed to stay in the United States, given the asylum track record that we have. That in itself is another big challenge. So I want to sort of turn your attention into to some of the slides so that you can see your peers in full action. So I know this takes a community to build the Dignity Kits. And at first, I had no idea what it took to build a Dignity Kit. When I first picked up the bags from Cheryl and Jack, I said, 100 kits. Like, okay, 100 kits. And then I sort of like paused and looked into the kit and I said, my God, I wonder how many human hours it takes to find the resources, to package the kits, to write the personal notes in Spanish, to say, may God bless you, go in peace, we're praying for you, and to do that individually so that when we have the honor of being entrusted with those kids, then we can turn those kids to other hands so that they in turn can take them to the community need is and begin to have a conversation about a welcoming message for people that are waiting in shelters, or people that we meet out on the streets, or farm workers that find themselves to be home free or homeless. And so I can tell you how many conversations I have had with people that I don't know with those Dignity Kits. And they make for incredible opportunities to just sort of like bring a joy, bring dignity, and bring hope, and say, please don't lose the trust. On the contrary, remain confident and know that people are praying for you. So here's the first slide. Let's see what the second, third, fourth slide look like. Oh, okay. I recognize this slide. And so when I said that we couldn't do any of this if it wasn't for our partners and our friends and the family, I have a very loving family. And so when Placitas team comes over, that basically means that my family has a mission. And the mission is to help put together the things that are still not assembled, or to ensure that we do the inventory, or to prepare backpacks with meaningful goodies. And so I can tell you how much you have enriched my family, especially my mother, my nieces, my mom's caregivers, because this really becomes a family affair. So what you see here is that you see a combination of my colleagues from work, my colleagues from Border Hope Institute, my most recent partner in this mission and adventure, which is Jerry, who's the owner of Jardín de Milagros. And he confirmed Cheryl and Jack yesterday, when I saw him at a board meeting with the food bank, that he's willing to share the tomatoes and the squash. So I have to make arrangements this Sunday to go and pick up tomatoes in cases. I have no idea what cases it is, but we'll figure it out so that we can bring tomatoes, and then we can move tomatoes across to the Mexican side. And I can already see some incredible enchiladas and sauces and so forth taking place. So what you see here is a fantastic group of community health workers, promotores de salud, as well as actually participants of one of our recent research projects. A couple of the ladies that are trans, and that they were living at Casa de Carmelita, but they're no longer in Casa de Carmelita. Actually, one is in Los Angeles and the other one is in New Jersey, New York, and they're finalizing their court agreements. So you see the little ones as young as 3 years old, who volunteers to carry stuff with his siblings, to the eldest, who's probably in the early or mid 70s and somewhere in between, Hispanic, non-Hispanic, monolingual, bilingual, trilingual, all come together on a Saturday when the time comes and we have a date with destiny. And we're here basically to help. And so at the bottom, we see another smaller group, including Omar's family, the children that make this their family affair. including one of the police officers from my university who volunteers and who is very committed to addressing food insecurity. And so my house is not huge. It has a 2-vehicle garage. We only have 1 vehicle at home. And so it makes for a fantastic place where I think Placitas can park your goods and we can store them. We can do the inventory. We can organize, nothing sophisticated. And then we open up the garage doors and allow for my friends from the Dominican Sisters, Whole Border Institute, Save the Children, the Border Service Corps, former MSW or social work students, and other friends that commute back and forth between Juarez and El Paso. And with their support, we put our vehicles to good use. We fill our vehicles or SUVs. We pray in multiple languages so that when we approach the customs, we don't get stopped or we don't get a red light. And when that happens, when we get a green light, we just sort of like just move accordingly and smoothly between the international border so that we can then go to the shelters and distribute the goods that you so beautifully and gratefully sent us. Among the things that we have been also working on is to also serve the needs of the other communities that are coming through El Paso. So here's sort of like the loading of the items, the community in Placitas getting ready to fill the U-Haul, and we can go to the next one. Thank you. And this is at the other end. I remember taking this photo with the teddy bears. My friend from Ohio, Peter Friedman, is the reason why I first connected with the humanitarian efforts, and he loves teddy bears. And so he keeps sending boxes of teddy bears with the hope to put those teddy bears in the hands of children. And so they could bring a little bit of comfort. And so that day, I remember we distributed close to 200 teddy bears to children. Next one. Here you see other goods as donated by Placitas and also my colleagues from the Period Project that provide underwear with a lot of diapers and also the children's dignity kits. And so this is at the Filter, which is the primary entity in Juarez that does the screening and the testing for COVID and ensures that people are registered. The next one. This is Casa del Migrante, which is the shelter with the largest trajectory of providing care for immigrants and migrants. And this is Sister Gabi from the Dominican Sisters. And so what we see basically is we bring donations. We come in, we interact with the managers, with the volunteers, with the guests, and then we silently leave. And so we're trying to do that as much as we can. Casa del Migrante has been in existence for, I said, more than 27 years, I believe. And so they have been at the forefront of welcoming brothers and sisters long before the most recent humanitarian crisis has taken place. Next one. And here I see our friends, the Dominicas as well. And this was one of the days when the garage was almost getting cleaned. So we were left with, I think I see a lot of potato chips, a lot of tostadas. And we were able to organize bags of rice. We sometimes get the big bag of rice. And so we try to do Ziploc bags so that we can have more families benefit. And so this is a traditional day when others come in and we share the goods and they help us cross. They take photos when they deliver the goods in the Mexican side. And so the mission continues. The next one. And so these are photos that we're taking with consent from my colleague, Omar Rios. He works with the Whole Border Institute. And as you can see, you see the grocery bags, which are fantastic, followed by Nido. Nido continues to be a critical donation for families. Nido's both the red cap or the transparent one. I think one is for babies and the other one is for infants. Diapers continue to be a very important donation. Underwear, the winter is coming up. I know that blankets, beanies, gloves, scarves, and we're getting ready to buy an additional lot of sneakers and tennis shoes. And I'll tell you more about that in a minute. So next one. This is where we visited Respettrans with Sister Gabi and my friend Jack and Cheryl in the back. And it was one of those days where I think our friends had an opportunity to visit. And I'm especially proud of this visit because I think Jack and Cheryl sort of like knew about Respettrans from photos, but to be able to be present and to really be in the company of those that are at the forefront, you know, donating their time, giving of themselves, running the facility because, you know, Gracia is present on this photo, you know, but right after we took that photo, she needed to get to her evening job. And she goes to work at 8 p.m., comes out of 8 a.m., gets a few hours of sleep, then goes to her second job, and then spends the rest of her time in the shelter. And what happened after this visit is that Sister Gabi had no idea that Respettrans existed. And she said, what have we been missing? Well, Sister Gabi offered to come back. And she said, I can come back. And she said, I'm fantastic at playing with children. So she ended up volunteering and she brought 3 of her other sisters. And so now they're visiting Respettrans weekly and bringing in activities to work with the children, which is fantastic. And that's what I think at the end of the day, life is all about. It's about connecting people with opportunities and finding meaningful ways to practice more humanity. Next one. This is the Respettrans. And by the way, they don't own the building. This building literally is like the Pisa Tower in Italy. When you saw like stand in front of it, you said, my God, this is not constructed well. What this is the facility that they can afford. They're paying rent. I think they paid about $1,000 a month, which they raise funds and they get different support, nothing coming from the government. And so it has, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, it has 5 floors. Today, the floor on the very top, and I've been there and I walked and it's like, my God, okay, this is gonna fall. But today, that floor on the very top is the facility that basically houses young men, single men. So almost every space of this facility, including the first floor, which is the dining area, is pretty much packed. Gracia and volunteers have been working on putting glass because most of it didn't have glass. And so I remember a time where we got donations of linens. And so therefore the linens were huge. They were king size and they came from Hawaii. And so it was funny because we said we got like boxes of linens. And my partner said, well, Eva, we could cut them and make them twin size. I said, that sounds like a fair thing to do. And then Gracia said, what about if we sort of like use them as curtains? And with the support of the sewing machines that Placitas in the community have been bringing over, now they have curtains, now they have flowers, now they have all sorts of things that have made this space, which was a very sober place, a much more friendly, welcoming place. This is only like 3 blocks away from the International Bridge to get into El Paso. Next one. So there are a lot of things you can do before. If you don't mind, let's go back to the one previous, Lloyd. Yeah, right there. So most recently, we've been pretty much involved in addressing also the needs of our brothers and sisters from Haiti. El Paso became the hub of close to 4,000 people from Haiti that were traveling from Venezuela, then went through Brazil, and then ended up going to El Rio in Texas, and then ended up being moved to El Paso. And so a good number of them, I believe like 2,000 have stayed in Mexico. And then the remaining have pretty much been moved into the United States. And so Annunciation House, which is an incredible partner in El Paso, they were the ones that primarily provided support and shelter. And so I asked Cheryl and Jack, and I said, Cheryl and Jack, our partners are in need of, underwear, dignity kits, shoes. And so immediately, with the support of donations that we had, we were there to provide, I think we bought close to 200 pairs of tennis shoes. And it really sort of like filled my heart when one of my colleagues said, Eva, when the tennis shoes came in, the sneakers, the young boys were saying, we have not worn a pair of sneakers in the last 2 years. When they arrived in the United States, they were basically wearing their flip-flops. And as you can imagine, not ideal. So I'm glad that we were just a little drop in the bucket of need, but we were able to quickly and efficiently respond to our partners, and the help came through. And now there's not a single person from Haiti at the hotel or Annunciation House. They have been moved and they have been resettled now with sponsors or with families throughout the United States. Now, another thing has happened in our community. The Doña Ana village, which is just outside of El Paso in Canutillo, is now run by the Fort Bliss base, which is the second largest Army base in the United States. And in the middle of the desert, just next to the Franklin Mountains and the Oregon Mountains in New Mexico, southern Doña Ana, there is a big village that is housing anywhere between 11 to 14,000 people from Afghanistan. And so our community, our Paso del Norte region, has grown beautifully and become much more international as a result of the Afghan families now being in our community. So that's in a nutshell. That's, yeah. So I could go on and on, but that's not the idea. The idea is to really allow for you to have a conversation, for me to try to either bring perspectives, to thank you once again for all the incredible things you continue to do. And sort of like the last thing that we're right now working on is we're working with Don and Nancy Tubenstein. And they have identified Scholastic to be one of the major publishers for books for children. And so now we're in a mission to identify the best books in Spanish for children, so that we might be able, through the leadership of Don and Nancy, to maybe get a significant donation of books so that we can make those books available to children in the shelters, ideally in Juarez, but also children that are unaccompanied minors, because let us not forget about that. The unaccompanied minors are still very much present in our community, and there's a village for unaccompanied minors that is being run by the Fort Bliss as well. So that gives you some perspective. I think we're at a time where the border is challenged, a time where the border brings out its best of resiliency and ability to adapt. A lot of recommendations need to take place. We need immigration reform without a doubt. We need to halt remain in Mexico. We need to let go remain in Mexico. We need to, in my opinion, it's time to lift the Title 42 and allow for safe process to allow for the families to begin to make their ways into the international bridges. Most likely families that make their way to the international bridges are going to spend some time in detention. Could be hours, could be days, could be weeks, could be months. I've known of individuals that have been in detention for up to a year and a half, until the time that they can be released and connected with a shelter, so that they can be connected with a sponsor. And then at that time, they can leave El Paso in order to meet with the sponsor, wherever the sponsor might be. And so a lot of things need to take place, but I'll stop there and make sure that there is an opportunity to have a conversation. So I'll take the cue from Lisa, Amy, Karen.
You're muted, Lisa.
Gotcha. Thank you. I have two questions at this point, and if others have something you want to ask, please get it on the chat. I'm going to start with Paula Laura Stokes, who brought this to our attention. Amy Goldman had an interview today with people who are working on the border. They said that the Biden administration is continuing the Title 42 program, which was exploited by Trump. This act allows the deporting of people due to the process during the public health crisis. I'll put it that way. Can you give us any comments on this? And also, it was said that Biden had stopped separating families. What can you say about those issues?
Title 42 expulsions is still pretty much out there. I am hopeful, given that as of yesterday afternoon, The administration announced that the international borders are going to be opened for those that have been vaccinated and that are considered non-essential. And now there's probably going to be the opportunity for people to move between the two countries. My take is that there's enough political pressure put in place, and the only way that's going to happen is if you and I call our members of Congress and Senate and say, it is time. It is time for you to uplift, remove Title 42 expulsions so that those that have been waiting would have an opportunity for their case to be heard. Now that we have been able to test, vaccinate, we're in a better position to make a case that we're doing everything humanly possible to protect each other. But yes, as of today, Title 42 is still real, and it's getting in the way of good number of communities not being able to safely move between the two countries for them to apply fairly and legally for the asylum or the refugee status. Our families being separated, you're gonna find that once families are able to cross that international bridge and escorted, most likely by an organization because they have legal representation, which is the other reality. Without legal representation, your ability to make it to the international bridge and have your case be acknowledged and to have a court date is almost zero. So that legal counsel, pro bono counsel, is extremely important to really help the families understand and navigate the complex American system of asylum or refugee applications. We have international organizations on the ground, which is incredible. Highest and others, you know, they're paying for the legal counsel to allow for the families to cross safely. But you know what's happening as well? That people are getting very impatient. Because as I mentioned to you, Juarez is not an ideal place for you to be permanently living if you're not employed and you don't have a safety net. So people are paying smugglers. And when they're paying smugglers, what's happening is if they're caught, they're going to be detained. If they're detained, they're going to be marked for life. And their chances of them going the legal route are going to be small. And there are people that get detained, they get released, and because they pay the coyote to try 3 times, and then they lose whatever money they have paid the coyote, you know, or the smuggler, they will try their best to go the second or even the third time. But people are spending time in detention. And when it's a family, you know, it's, and it shouldn't, at the discretion of ICE. For them, they might separate the parents, mother, father, if it's a family. Sometimes they separate the mother from the older sibling or son. And so therefore you do have, unfortunately, family separation taking place. We also are seeing an increase of unaccompanied minors. And these minors are not necessarily coming from Mexico. They're coming from El Salvador, Nicaragua, they're coming from Cuba, they're coming from all over the world. That we haven't stopped seeing. And there seems to be sort of like trends where it's a little bit more common, probably given the weather. And as I was mentioning to you, right now the weather is pretty beautiful and comfortable. But once the weather hits the winter, the temperatures could be brutal in the desert and so during the summer. And so it is unfortunate people are in detention. The immigration detention facilities in my community are filled and the conditions are many times inhumane. So, you know, the irony of being in ICE facilities is that on one hand, you know, we know the things that need to get done in ICE. You know, we know that they should accommodate for the basic needs. We know that they should be able to give access basically to healthcare services. But the reality is that, you know, it's sort of like they have outside detention, but then they get inside immigration, customs, and foreign detention. On one hand, you know, the wearing of the mask is not always enforced, it's inconsistent. There's very limited ability to have social distance when you are detained. We know that, okay, you need to wash hands, soap, water, have 3 meals. The reality is that many times people in detention don't have 3 meals or they have the same meal. The conditions are bad. Some of these conditions resemble like hieleras. They're like literally freezers, especially during the winter. I have seen children that when they're released, they come out with pneumonia and problems. So these are the children that end up in the emergency room. Limited access to soap, to clean water, to feminine hygiene products. And so it's very difficult to really have the ICE facilities do what they can do, because it's within their reach to do the right thing. There are some exceptions, but there are a lot of challenges. So I think we need to work very closely with the administration and hold the administration accountable, and call our members of Congress and Senate and ensure that we can work on what I call a humanitarian way of reforming the immigration system, because it's a system that continues to be broken.
Dr. Moya, that was one of the questions that Karen brought up, was what should we say to our elected officials? How do we, what is the best way to speak to them of the issue, which I think you've covered pretty well. We also have a question, and you might want to, if you want to go into things, we've got about 5 more minutes with the questions, and I have another issue. I'm looking for it right now. What short-term volunteer opportunities are available at the border? Amy brought up this issue.
Fantastic question. The Annunciation House is probably one of the organizations that is the most stable and that has a volunteer component to it. If you're interested in volunteering in the US-Mexico border, primarily El Paso, Juarez, go to the Annunciation website, apply to become a volunteer. What they do is that they get a lot of requests. They will go over your application. They'll tell you, this is where we need you. If you happen to be bilingual, maravilloso. If you're not that bilingual, don't worry. I've seen incredible volunteers that are monolingual in English, and they learn Spanish, and they practice a lot of Espanol. There's certain things in humanity that are universal. And the smile, the caring, the ability to make people welcome, that cuts across language and cultures. So Annunciation House, in my opinion, would be the first place for you to sign up. If you had, for example, a 2-week period that you wanted to volunteer and be in the trenches of one of the shelters in the El Paso side, that is the place, in my opinion, to go. The second place would be the Border Hope Institute. And I think I also saw the website linked in your chat. And then if you wanted to volunteer on the Mexican side, I would say I will start with Casa del Migrante with Padre Calvillo, and we can get you that contact information. And it is because, it's a facility that it is very well established. They might be able to find you a place where you can sleep in Juarez, ideally stay in Juarez to avoid the coming and the going. If you're not familiar with Juarez and El Paso, it could take an hour, 2 hours, up to 3 hours to cut that international bridge. So if you're going to stay in Juarez for a week or two, it's better for you to stay in Juarez in a place that it is safe, or a nearby hotel, so that you can dedicate your talent and your time and be directly working at Casa del Migrante. If you wanted to volunteer in Respettrans, I think it's a conversation with Gracia, especially if you are someone that has been trained in healthcare, or someone that has been trained in education, or someone that has special skills to work with children. All those are areas that are very much needed. I see Border Hope Institute, Border Refugee Assistance, and also, if for whatever reason you say, how I wish that I could volunteer, but I may not have the time. But remember that the time is the most valuable thing you have. So time translates into capital. So if you said, I'm not going to be able to make it this time and give 1 or 2 weeks of my time, maybe you can translate that into a donation. And maybe you put a little bit of your dollars or your pesos, and you say, okay, I'm going to do a third, I don't know, Placitas, the humanitarian fund, Dignity. I'm going to do another third, the Annunciation House, and I'm going to do another third, Border Hope Institute. Or you do a whole single and you say, you know what, I'm going to give my donation directly to. Or if you wish, depending on the list of things that are most needed, you're welcome to send your shipment to Mi Casa, Su Casa. Just make sure that on the label you put Eva Moya in care of Dignity Mission. So that way I know when the arrivals comes in, I know that it's associated with the Dignity. So there was a time where we had the Dignity Mission, and then we also had the LGBTQI mission, and then we had the Haitian mission. So as long as you sort of help me identify which mission you would like to support, we'll be happy to ensure that your goods get crossed. Yes.
Yes, that's excellent information. And I would ask that everybody continue to refer to the chat because save it. You'll find valuable information there. There's one very interesting long comment made by a friend here in Placitas, Vicky Gottlieb, and I would like to put you in touch with her. She has had experience in many different areas, and rather than try to cover it right now, I will make sure that she gets in touch with you and you with her, because she's got some very interesting ideas, places she's been, things she's done. She would like to be a help. So thank you, Vicky, for your comments, and we will make sure that you two get connected. I'm looking to see, I think that's the last of our questions, but again, on the chat is the over and over and over again, the huge information that's been discussed tonight. So many different ways to help. Please stay in touch with that. And I guess this goes back now to Karen, and we will work with thanking you again so very, very much. We hope you'll hear from us with any number of ways that that you've expressed to us that we can be of help. This is such a critical ongoing thing. It is the value of American ideas that we're looking at here, and we need to change the concept of what we have seen too often in the last few years and get this thing turned around as best we can, as fast as we can, in every way that we can. Karen, to you, my dear.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for handling the question and answer for us. Amy, would you like to thank Dr. Moya from your good heart to her good heart?
Amy, I think you're muted.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moya. That was so. Eva. Yes, Eva. Thank you so much. That was so inspiring. And I hope to find the time within the year to come and spend some time in Juarez or in Annunciation House. Those are sterling opportunities for many of us. So, and I will share that with my colleagues from the 5-site coalition. So please be safe, be happy, and continue what you're doing, because you're doing God's work. Thank you.
Okay, we're all doing God's work. Thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing friends this Saturday arrive with another U-Haul truck. And we have a delegation of friends ready to help unload. And then you'll put us to great use. Okay, thank you very much for your generosity, your time. Be well, stay healthy, and continue to do good. Okay.
Thank you, Eva. Let's show some hands, some clapping. You can put up images. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Be
you.
well.